They thought it would be routine. 2 officers, a lonely road, and 1 black man they believed had no power, no backup, no voice. But they picked the wrong man. He wasn't just a driver, he was the one person with the authority to turn their careers and their lives upside down. What began as harassment escalated into assault, then arson, but the real fire didn't come from them. It came from him. And once it started, there was no putting it out. This isn't just a story about corruption. It's about truth, survival, and the moment a man chose to fight back with the whole system watching. Let us know what time you're watching and where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment, we'd love to hear from you. The sun dipped low over the winding backroads of Hamilton County, Georgia, casting long shadows over pine trees that had stood their ground since before anyone around had memory. Behind the wheel sat 62-year-old Jeremiah Cole, retired U.S. Marshal, quiet as a preacher but with eyes that had seen too much. These days, folks in high places called him something else. Special investigator for the governor's task force on police reform, but nobody in Hamilton needed to know that he wore no badge today. Just a flannel shirt, dusty jeans, and a pair of boots that had outlasted 2 administrations and 3 different wars on crime. He looked like any other older black man coming home for the weekend, and that was exactly what he wanted. He had wrapped his last assignment up north and had a plane ticket waiting for him in Atlanta. But then came a letter, handwritten from his niece, Uncle Jay. "You promised. Walk me across that stage." That was enough. Family always was. Just a man on a quiet road, heading to a small town graduation. Or so he thought. As he crossed a narrow wooden bridge over Stillwater Creek, he spotted headlights fast approaching in his rearview mirror, a white Dodge Charger, county markings on the sides, moving like a shark in murky water. No siren at first. Jeremiah's grip on the wheel tightened as his instincts kicked in. This wasn't traffic enforcement. This was a show of force. The lights flashed once, then again, then stayed on. He sighed, pulling gently to the shoulder. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. 2 officers stepped out, both white. One tall and wiry, chewing gum with the smugness of someone who hadn't been punched in the mouth when he needed to be. The other was stocky, thick neck, mirrored sunglasses despite the sun sinking fast. They didn't walk up like peace officers. They came like they owned the world. Jeremiah kept both hands in plain view, resting on the wheel. Decades of training made the movement automatic. Be calm. Be still. Survive. The tall one leaned down. You know why we stopped you?" "No idea," Jeremiah replied, voice level. "Plates don't match the database. Might be a mix-up. You mind stepping out for a second?" Jeremiah hesitated. "Mix up? I'm just driving home. Step out of the vehicle, sir," the cop repeated, firmer this time. No room for negotiation. Jeremiah nodded. "All right." No sudden moves. He got out slowly, careful, deliberate. The stocky cop walked behind the truck, inspecting the bed like he expected to find contraband. The tall one circled Jeremiah, too close smelling of stale coffee and old sweat. "You from around here?" "Used to be," Jeremiah said. "That right?" the officer replied. "Skeptical? What brings you back now?" Jeremiah glanced toward the graduation tassel hanging from his rearview mirror. "Family," the cop grinned. "Truck like this. Look like that. You sure you're not lost?" Jeremiah didn't take the bait. "No, sir. I'm exactly where I need to be." The second officer opened the passenger door and reached for Jeremiah's duffel bag. "That's personal property," Jeremiah said calmly. The officer unzipped it. For a moment, he froze. Inside was a worn leather folder, stamped confidential, and an old U.S. Marshal badge gleaming under the light. His expression hardened. "What's this?" "Fake credentials," That's a federal badge, Jeremiah said quietly. The tall cop leaned in, close enough to feel the heat of his breath. You're awful calm for a guy about to be detained. Jeremiah looked him square in the eye. Because I know what this is, and so do you. That didn't sit right with them. A third car pulled up behind them, and out stepped a young woman, early 20s, uniform still stiff from academy starch, Deputy Laura Hensley. She looked from her senior officers to the older black man, standing alone on the roadside. Something in her posture said she didn't like what she saw. You guys need backup? She asked. Nah, the stocky one replied, dismissive. We've got a suspicious vehicle and a possibly stolen truck. Just routine? Jeremiah blinked. You're saying this truck's stolen. Plates don't match, the tall one said, smirking. Or maybe they do. Depends on the story you want to tell us. The rookie frowned. Sir, he hasn't resisted. We should confirm. Quiet. Hensley, the stocky cop, snapped. We've got it under control. Jeremiah stood tall. His body might have aged, but his backbone hadn't gone anywhere. This isn't about a truck, he said slowly. It's about control. You think you know what's happening here? The tall one asked. I know exactly what's happening, Jeremiah replied. And you're making a mistake. You don't tell us what's a mistake, the stocky one growled, stepping in closer. Laura shifted uncomfortably, her hand hovering near her radio. The taller officer reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and started taking pictures of the truck, of Jeremiah, smiling like he just bagged a trophy buck. Jeremiah didn't move. He didn't flinch. But inside, the storm was building. They didn't know who he was. Not yet, but they were about to find out. Jeremiah stood motionless on the gravel shoulder, red and blue lights flickering across his skin like some cruel alarm against decency. His boots were planted firm, hands open, posture non-threatening, yet the tension around him crackled like dry leaves underfoot. These weren't just overzealous cops anymore. They were men looking for a target, and they thought they'd found one. The tall officer, Brent Calloway, took 2 slow steps forward, eyes narrowed, lips curled. He jabbed 2 fingers against Jeremiah's chest. Turn around. Hands on the truck, he said. Jeremiah didn't flinch. For what cause? Calloway smirked, like a man daring the storm. Failure to comply. Resisting if you keep asking questions. Jeremiah's jaw tightened, but he turned slowly, placing both hands flat on the truck bed. It wasn't submission. It was strategy. Live now. Fight back smart. The stocky officer, Eric Dugan, moved in next. His pat down was more punishment than protocol, slamming palms against Jeremiah's back, hips, and ribs with unnecessary force. He found the leather folder again, pulled it from Jeremiah's duffel, and opened it. Looks official, he muttered, squinting at the badge. Calloway glanced over. So what? Could be a toy from a costume shop. Jeremiah turned his head slightly. Interfering with a federal officer is a felony. Dugan laughed. You hear that, Brent? We got ourselves a real federal badass. Calloway wasn't laughing anymore. He snatched the badge, turned it over in his hand, brow furrowing. There was hesitation, just a flicker. But pride and ignorance overrode doubt. Fake or not, he said, tossing the badge back into the dirt. This guy needs to be taught how things work out here. Jeremiah clenched his jaw, but said nothing. His silence wasn't weakness. It was control, and they mistook it for fear. Calloway pointed toward the gravel. Sit. Now. Jeremiah didn't move. Go ahead, he said quietly. Run the plates. The truck's mine. Been mine for 15 years. That answer didn't satisfy them, because this wasn't about paperwork anymore. It never had been. Dugan started walking around the Silverado, hand brushing his holster, then tapping his phone. No cameras out here. No cell towers. For 5 miles. No dash cams. Ain't that something? From the edge of the scene, The rookie Deputy Hensley shifted on her feet. Her voice cracked through the noise. Uncertain but brave. "Shouldn't we wait for verification before escalating?" Calloway snapped back. He escalated it the moment he flashed that fake badge. Jeremiah looked straight at her. His voice didn't rise. "It didn't need to." "Deputy," he said, "you have a choice to make right now. You can either stand for what's right or help cover what's wrong." She froze, eyes wide. She wasn't used to this. Real justice doesn't look like a training video. Dugan called out, "Guess what I found in the truck bed?" Jeremiah knew even before he turned. Dugan was holding his emergency gas can, the one he kept for long country drives. Now it sloshed ominously in his hand. Calloway raised an eyebrow. "What the hell are you doing?" Dugan grinned, giving him a lesson in respect. Jeremiah's voice sharpened. "Put that down." But Dugan didn't. He unscrewed the cap and began walking around the truck, splashing fuel across the tires, along the tailgate, even under the chassis. Deputy Hensley stepped forward, panic in her voice. "Stop. What are you doing?" Calloway turned sharply. "Back off, rookie. This is beyond your pay grade. This is arson," she shouted. "You can't. This is criminal." Calloway's voice dropped. Venomous. "You want to be promoted? Or you want to be unemployed?" Jeremiah felt the heat rising not from the fuel, but from the hate. They were doing this because they could, because they thought no one would stop them. "You light that," he warned. "You burn more than rubber. You burn your future." Dugan chuckled, pulling something small and silver from his pocket. The click of the lighter echoed like a death sentence. "Put it out," Hensley begged, but the flame danced in the breeze, alive and hungry. And then he threw it. The fire caught instantly. The rear of the Silverado exploded in orange and red, flames racing along the fuel lines, consuming everything in seconds. Heat punched the air. Glass shattered. The roar of the fire drowned out everything. Jeremiah staggered back, shielding his face. His truck, his memories, his brother's flag, his father's war knife, his entire past was vanishing in smoke and screams. Dugan stepped back, brushing his hands like a man who'd just finished yard work. "Should have kept your mouth shut," he muttered. Jeremiah didn't blink. His fists were clenched, not from pain, but from purpose. "You don't know what you've done," he said. Calloway sneered. "We just cleaned up some garbage." Behind them, Hensley trembled. Her face was pale, hands shaky as she clutched her radio. Jeremiah turned to her. "Get in your cruiser. Turn on your camera. Call dispatch." She nodded. Calloway took a menacing step toward her. "Don't." Jeremiah moved between them. "Touch her. And I swear to God." His tone stopped Calloway cold. Not because he raised his voice, but because he didn't have to. Hensley jumped in her car, locked the doors, and grabbed the mic. "Dispatch," she said, voice shaking. "Officer request backup. Officer request backup. Possible arson. Officer conflict on scene." As the transmission went out, silence fell across the scene. Except for the roar of the burning Silverado, Jeremiah stood alone in front of it. The fire silhouetted his figure tall, still, and unbroken. But inside him, something colder than fire had awakened. They thought they could erase him. They just exposed themselves. And this wasn't over. Not even close. The fire still raged behind him. Even from several feet away, Jeremiah could feel its heat clawing up his back like angry fingers. What had once been his truck, his companion on 1,000 long roads, his quiet retreat, the rolling monument to everything he'd built, was now a flaming skeleton. But it wasn't just about the truck. It never was. It was about everything they tried to take from him. His dignity, his name, his right to exist, unthreatened. Dugan stood with arms crossed, face smug, like he'd just won some sad game only he understood. Calloway, though he was pacing now, his energy had shifted. The adrenaline was leaking out, and with it came the creeping stink of realization. The rookie had called it in. Dispatch had responded. Help was on the way. You idiot, Calloway hissed, rounding on Dugan. She called for backup. She called it in. Dugan shrugged. So what? We say he went for a weapon. Say he flashed a fake badge. Who are they gonna believe? Jeremiah stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately. Smoke streaked across his face, blood crusting near his temple. One hand braced against his side. His ribs were screaming, but his eyes were steel. You just committed felony assault, he said. Destruction of property. Arson. And, for the record, that badge you laughed at, it's real. Confirmed by the state. Calloway froze. Dugan blinked. The hell you say? Jeremiah didn't blink. You didn't just rough up some random black guy in a truck. You assaulted the state's lead investigator for internal affairs. I report directly to the governor's office. That hit harder than a punch. Dugan's smirk cracked into something like horror. His lips parted, then closed. He looked to Calloway, but the tall officer was already a few shades paler than before. Before either of them could speak, Jeremiah staggered, breath hitching as a jolt of pain shot through his side. He reached out, grabbed the truck's rear fender, still blistering with heat, and steadied himself. But he didn't fall. He wouldn't give them that. I tried to give you a way out, he said, his voice like gravel. I gave you warnings. You chose the fire. From behind, Deputy Hensley stepped forward, body cam now blinking red. She didn't interfere. She didn't shout. She just stood still, hand on her sidearm, recording everything. Dugan took a threatening step toward Jeremiah. We can still fix this. Say you resisted. Say you. Jeremiah raised a hand. Not fast, just firm. Don't. The air thickened. You touch me again, and I'll assume you're trying to finish the job. I promise you, I won't go down quiet this time. Calloway looked to Hensley. His voice cracked under pressure. You're with us, right? You saw what happened. She didn't look at him. I'm with the law. And in that moment, something broke, not in her voice, but in theirs. In the distance, sirens began to wail, getting closer, louder. Dugan clenched his fists. We're dead. We're absolutely no. Calloway growled. We spin it. Say he pulled a weapon. Say he confessed. The badge was fake. Say anything. Jeremiah tilted his head. You think a lie will work when every moment's been recorded? You think Atlanta won't see this fire from their Capitol window? Calloway sneered. The people upstairs only care about results. That was true until today. The first cruiser pulled up. Tires crunched to a halt. Two officers stepped out, startled by the blaze, the smoke, and the bloodied man standing before a burning wreck. Hensley walked over, waving them down. Keep your cams rolling, she said. He's not a suspect. He's the investigator. State level. Task force. One of the new officers turned to Jeremiah, stunned. Is that true, sir? Jeremiah nodded, pulled a scorched but intact ID from his shirt pocket. The gold seal still visible through the soot. Jeremiah Cole, he said. Internal affairs. The mood changed instantly. Calloway turned ghost white. Dugan stepped back, almost tripping on loose gravel. One of the officers radioed in, confirmed, IA on scene. Possible officer misconduct, code red. The other stepped toward Jeremiah. Do you need medical? I need accountability, Jeremiah said. Secure the area and separate those two. Hensley's body cam caught every word. What was in the truck? One officer asked. Evidence, Jeremiah said. History. All gone. Dugan spun around, like he might run. This is crap! Don't move! The officer shouted, gun drawn but pointed low. More cars began to arrive. Sirens faded, one by one. What started as a crooked stop had become a crime scene, and at its center stood Jeremiah, battered, bruised, but unshaken. Calloway looked desperate now. "You don't know what you've done to this department." "I know exactly what I've done," Jeremiah said. "I stopped the bleeding." "You think people will believe your version of things?" Calloway snapped. "You're just—" "Don't," Jeremiah warned, taking one slow step forward. "You finish that sentence, and I promise you, you won't just lose your badge. You'll lose your name." Hensley stepped beside him. Jeremiah turned toward the growing group of officers, now forming a perimeter. Flashlights cut through the smoke. Radios buzzed, but the air was quiet, waiting. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" Jeremiah asked, locking eyes with Dugan. "I see cowards. I see men who thought they could do anything, and no one would speak up. I see the death of accountability." Calloway opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Jeremiah stepped in one last time, his voice like thunder. "You forgot something important. I'm not just a man in a truck. I'm the one they send when people like you think they're untouchable." And just like that, they weren't. Jeremiah stood motionless, in the center of a nightmare he never signed up for. Behind him, the Silverado continued to smolder, steel frame glowing faintly, like the dying embers of a fire that had already consumed everything. The scent of scorched rubber and burnt leather hung heavy in the Georgia air. Red and white emergency lights pulsed off the pine trees like a slow heartbeat, casting dancing shadows across the gravel like ghosts of justice, not yet delivered. Officers moved with urgency around the scene, cordoning off the area, photographing the wreckage, whispering into radios, but none dared to approach him directly now. They gave him space, not out of respect, out of fear, out of recognition. He wasn't some nameless face anymore. He was the one man whose word carried weight, heavier than any badge on that scene. Paramedics tried to steer him toward the back of an ambulance, but he brushed them off. His side ached with every breath. His leg was throbbing from where he'd gone down hard, but he wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not while those two sat comfortably in the backs of patrol cars like this. Was just another rough night on the job. Every moment he remained standing sent a message. He hadn't broken. Not from the assault. Not from the humiliation. Not from the flames. And he wasn't alone. Across the narrow two-lane stretch of County Road, a porch light blinked on, a wooden screen door creaked open, and from the shadows stepped a woman, short, gray-haired, wrapped in a faded blue housecoat. Her slippers shuffled softly across the wooden planks. In her hands, she carried something strange, something out of place, a camcorder. One of those big, boxy, shoulder-mounted types that hadn't been seen in public since the 90s. Jeremiah blinked, watching as the woman walked slowly toward the road, holding the camcorder steady. There was no tremble in her grip, no hesitation, just quiet resolve. "You catch any of that?" he asked, voice hoarse. "All of it," she replied without breaking stride. Started rolling when the second one opened that gas can. He straightened, stunned by her calm. "What's your name?" "Martha." Martha Tiller. Something in that name struck him. A memory. A name etched into an old newspaper headline from decades past. Sheriff Walter Tiller respected. Old-school lawman who built the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department from scratch. A man known for his spine, not his smile. Jeremiah looked again at the woman, now standing just a few feet away. "You related to Walter Tiller?" She nodded once. "His widow?" He took a slow breath. "He was a good man." "He was," she said. "But this, what they did to you. He'd be sick if he saw what his department became." One of the officers noticed her and stepped toward her, hand raised. "Ma'am, I'm gonna have to ask for that camera." "You'll get a copy," Martha said, cutting him off cold. "The original stays with me. I'll be turning it over directly to the district attorney." The officer paused, unsure. "I'm within my rights," she added, narrowing her eyes. He nodded and backed off. Jeremiah smiled faintly. "Ma'am, that footage might be the difference between justice and another cover-up." She looked him square in the eye. "That's why I didn't stop recording." A long pause settled between them. Just the soft hiss of smoke, the occasional crunch of boots over gravel, and the static chatter of radios. "You got family in town?" she asked. "My niece. She's graduating tomorrow morning. You best be there. Don't let these cowards take that from you, too." He looked away, jaw tight. "They took everything else. My truck, my badge, my—" "No," she interrupted. "They tried, but you're still standing. You're still here. You showed them who you are." Behind them, Calloway and Dugan sat in separate squad cars, handcuffed and silent, their eyes now full of something they hadn't expected to feel tonight. Fear. Martha nodded toward them. "You want this to go public, don't you? I want them held accountable. No backroom handshakes. No quiet retirements. I want consequences." She took a breath, glanced toward the flames. "I may be old, but I've still got some pull, especially with my son." Jeremiah tilted his head. "Your son?" Martha's lips curled just slightly. "Glenn Tiller, district attorney." Jeremiah raised his brows. "That Glenn Tiller's your boy?" She gave a small nod, sharp as his father, meaner when he needs to be. "You'll want him on your side," Jeremiah exhaled slowly. "The pieces falling into place. I'll take all the allies I can get," Martha smiled. But there was nothing soft in it. "You've already got me. That footage is going nowhere, and my son's going to make sure this town never forgets tonight." More officers began to gather. The media hadn't arrived yet, but word was spreading. Calls were being made, and soon the flames behind him would become something else entirely, a beacon. Deputy Hensley stepped forward. "Sir, the watch commander is en route. They're requesting a formal statement when you're ready." Jeremiah turned to her. "You did the right thing." She swallowed hard. "I didn't stop them in time." "No," he said, "but you made sure the truth has a voice. That's more than most." She looked relieved, almost emotional. Jeremiah winced again as the pain in his ribs flared. Martha moved toward him and, without a word, slipped her arm around his waist, steadying him. "You're not done yet," she whispered. "But you're not alone anymore." He didn't speak, just nodded. The night wasn't over, but neither was he. Dawn hadn't broken yet, but the night had already changed everything. Jeremiah sat on the back bumper of an ambulance parked just beyond the blackened remains of his truck. His shirt was torn, ribs tightly bandaged, and streaks of dried blood clung to his skin like war paint. Paramedics hovered nearby, ready to lift him into the vehicle. But he waved them off with the same calm that had carried him through gunfire and corruption in his younger days. He wasn't leaving this ground, not until every second of this injustice was on record. The last of the fire crews were finishing their work. Water dripped from the twisted steel. Smoke hung low, like fog. There was nothing left of the Silverado but charred metal and ash. But that wreck was no longer just a vehicle, it was a crime scene, a symbol. And Jeremiah had no intention of letting anyone forget what it represented. The squad cars across the road looked different now, not like tools of authority, but like temporary holding cells, penitentiaries on wheels. Inside them, Calloway and Dugan sat quiet, pale, their energy drained. No more shouting, no more smirks. They weren't in charge anymore, and that was just the beginning. Jeremiah's phone, long thought lost in the scuffle, had been recovered by a young officer from the roadside brush. It was cracked, the screen spiderwebbed, but it still worked. A single message blinked at the top. Gov's office. Secure line. He stepped away from the crowd, limping slightly, and answered, "Cole." "Jeremiah, we heard," said a voice on the other end, calm, controlled. "But with the gravity of someone who understood the storm this would unleash. "Are you all right?" "I'll live." There was a pause. "We've been tracking your assignment, but no one expected it to escalate this quickly." "I did," he said. "That's why I came back early. I had a feeling something was rotting deeper than we thought." Another pause. "Do you want us to intervene?" "Not yet," Jeremiah replied. "I want the district attorney on this first. Glenn Tiller. Local but clean. He'll move faster than the courts." There was a moment of silence before the reply came. "You are hereby authorized to activate Tier 2 escalation. Legal resources, logistical support, press strategy, whatever you need, it's yours. I'll make it count," Jeremiah said, and ended the call. He stared out across the hills beyond the trees, where the sky was beginning to tint orange. A new day was coming, whether Hamilton County liked it or not. An hour later, Jeremiah walked into the sheriff's department like he owned the place. And, technically, for the next 48 hours he did. The governor's emergency powers granted to internal investigators meant he had full authority to audit, suspend, or seize without obstruction, and he planned to use every second of it. The room fell silent when he entered. Phones stopped ringing. Mugs were set down. Eyes dropped to desks. Some officers nodded at him. Some turned away. Others just watched, caught between fear and something they hadn't felt in years' accountability. At the front desk sat Deputy Hensley. She looked freshly showered, but emotionally wrecked. Her shoulders were tense, eyes red but focused. When she saw him, she stood up. "Sir, they said you're in control now, temporarily," Jeremiah said. "They asked me to write a report, accuse you of threatening officers, said you had forged identification." He raised an eyebrow. "And did you?" She shook her head. "I submitted everything. My footage, my statement. I named names. I told them the truth." Jeremiah nodded slowly. "That'll put a target on your back." "I know," she said quietly. "But I joined this force to protect people, not to protect men who wear uniforms to hide behind." He studied her for a long moment. "You've already earned your badge," he said. And for the first time since last night, Hensley smiled. A few minutes later, the front doors opened again, and in walked a man with a presence that silenced the room even further. Mid-40s, sharp suit, broad shoulders, blue eyes like cut glass. Glenn Tiller, district attorney for Hamilton County and son of Martha Tiller. He moved with the steady purpose of a man who didn't waste steps. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a calm, lethal energy in the other. He didn't look around, didn't hesitate. He walked straight up to Jeremiah. "My mama told me you were something else," Glenn said. "Said I'd better drop everything and come meet the man who made her put down her knitting and pick up her camcorder." Jeremiah gave a tired smile. "She's got a steadier aim than most deputies I've seen." "I know," Glenn replied. "She's got a war journal, not a diary. Let's talk." The two men entered the briefing room. No distractions, no noise. Jeremiah laid out every detail. The traffic stop, the escalation, the beatdown, the arson, the body cams, the recovered badge, the intimidation, the silence, the smirks, and finally, Martha's footage. Glenn didn't write a single note. He just listened. Every now and then, his jaw would clench, but his eyes never wavered. When it was over, Glenn leaned forward, both elbows on the table. "You want me to bury them?" "No," Jeremiah said. "I want you to expose them. I want their faces on every news station in the Southeast. I want every parent, every churchgoer, every voter in this state to see who they really were, and then I want you to make sure they never wear a badge again." Glenn sat back. "Then we start today." And in that moment, Jeremiah knew he had just found the first ally who could actually move mountains. The reckoning had begun. The door to the briefing room clicked shut behind them. For the first time since the night before, there was silence. No sirens. No radios. Just two men, and the weight of a broken system laid bare between them. Jeremiah stood in front of a whiteboard, dry erase marker in hand, already drawing connections, outlining names, dates, streets. Each stroke was deliberate, each note a scar made visible. He was mapping out rot, and it ran deep. "This isn't just Calloway and Dugan," Jeremiah said, circling a pattern of traffic stops with a red marker. "It's been happening for years. Same stretch of road, same profile of drivers, same fake justifications, different victims." Glenn Tiller sat across the table, hands steepled, watching the board. "We've had complaints, but they were scattered, disconnected. Most never made it past the front desk." Jeremiah capped the marker and turned to him. Because the front desk was the first line of defense, they never wanted it to go further. Internal affairs buried everything they could, and the ones that didn't get buried, they disappeared, withdrawn, settled. Or the complainants just stopped answering. Glenn's jaw clenched. "You think there were threats?" "I don't think," Jeremiah said. "I know. I've seen it before, just not this close to home." He crossed to the window and looked out over the parking lot. Media vans were starting to arrive, satellites rotating skyward. This wasn't a local story anymore. It had grown teeth and a camera crew. "I've already called in the state's federal audit team," he said. "We'll start with 3 years of traffic stop records. Every use of force complaint. Every body cam that was accidentally turned off. I want it all reopened." Glenn nodded slowly. "You'll have resistance." Jeremiah didn't flinch. Good. Outside the office, the department buzzed with cautious motion. Some officers pretended not to notice the shift. Others watched Jeremiah like he was a ghost, returned to pass judgment. And a few, just a few, seemed relieved. Deputy Hensley strode through the hall, her expression unreadable, a flash drive clenched in her palm like a weapon. She knocked once on the briefing room door. Glenn opened it. "This is the backup," she said, "from my cruiser, and the security cam from the lobby shows them bringing him in, bleeding. No charges. No reason. It's all time-stamped." He took it gently. "You okay?" "I'm furious," she said. "But I know what I saw, and I know what's right." Jeremiah motioned to the seat beside him. "You're going to be asked to testify, probably more than once." She nodded. "I'm not afraid of them anymore." For the next hour, the small town station began to shift. A server rack was wheeled into the back room. Laptop screens opened across desks. Glenn's paralegals arrived with case folders and voice recorders. It wasn't just a police station anymore. It was ground zero for a reckoning. Outside, news anchors stood beside microphones, rehearsing scripts. No one had the full story yet, but they could smell blood in the water. And soon, the world would know. Jeremiah stepped out once, for air. The reporters spotted him immediately. "Missed Cole, is it true you were targeted because of your race? Will you press charges personally? Did the governor authorize this investigation?" He didn't stop, didn't answer, just looked across the street. There on the porch stood Martha Tiller, arms folded, camcorder still in hand. Her presence was silent, but powerful. She gave him a slight nod. Inside, Glenn joined him. Press release just went out. Minimal details. No spin. "We're waiting until arraignment before saying more." "Good," Jeremiah said. "Let the facts speak first." But facts weren't the only things about to speak. At exactly 12:47 p.m., Jeremiah's phone rang again, a blocked number. One he recognized by its silence before the voice. "Jeremiah," the voice said, smooth and familiar. "I heard about your situation. Thought maybe we could chat. Off the record. Who is this? A friend. Let's just say I represent certain interests who want this cleaned up. Quietly, Jeremiah said nothing. The voice continued. Men like us, we know the game. We know things don't always go by the book. But when it gets messy, we fix it. So here's the offer. Calloway and Dugan resign quietly. No trial. No media storm. In exchange, the department avoids a scandal. The governor gets to claim reform. You get a medal and a quiet reassignment. Everybody wins. Jeremiah's jaw tensed. And the truth. Managed, the voice replied. Jeremiah's eyes scanned the lobby. Hensley was at her desk, calmly organizing statements. Glenn was speaking with another prosecutor. Officers were reviewing tapes. Then he looked across the street again. Martha was still there. He hung up without a word. Back inside, Glenn saw his face and knew pressure. Yeah, Jeremiah said. Threats? Not yet, but they're testing the waters. Glenn cracked his knuckles. Let them. Jeremiah turned back toward the bullpen, watching the slow but steady transformation unfolding. Officers no longer whispering in corners, but stepping forward, bringing reports, offering statements. You know what's different this time? Jeremiah asked. Glenn shook his head. We passed the point of no return. They can't bury it anymore. Too many eyes. Too many people willing to speak. Let's hope it holds. Glenn said. It will, Jeremiah replied, because this time, it's not just one man shouting in the dark. He turned back toward the door, ready to face the next call, the next fight, the next surprise waiting just outside. And as he walked, one thing became clear. They hadn't silenced him. They'd amplified him. The Hamilton County Courthouse had never seen anything like this. A building that had spent most of its life tucked in quiet obscurity now found itself surrounded by a wall of reporters, cameras, and chaos. Satellite vans lined the block. Boom mics hovered over barricades. Anchors whispered into live feeds. But they weren't just here for a story. They were here for a reckoning. And walking into the storm was Jeremiah Cole. He didn't come in with security or spectacle. No armored SUVs. No polished PR team. Just him, in a navy blue suit that fit snugly over fresh bandages, walking with slow, deliberate steps. Glenn Tiller was at his side, flanked by deputies from the district attorney's office. Their pace was steady, their faces unreadable. A reporter leaned over the rail, microphone extended. Mr. Cole, are you here to testify against your own department? Jeremiah paused, just long enough for the crowd to fall silent. Then he turned his head and spoke. I'm not here to destroy anything, he said. I'm here to tell the truth. And with that, he stepped inside. The hearing room was packed beyond capacity. Every wooden bench was filled. People lined the walls. Residents, journalists, off-duty officers, lawyers, clergy, students. Some held notepads. Some held hope. Some held nothing but silence. At the front, seated like a statue in the first row, was Martha Tiller. Her camcorder rested on her lap, a quiet reminder of the moment everything changed. The judge entered, a stern woman in her 60s, with a gray bob and glasses perched low on her nose. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on Jeremiah, and finally, on the two men brought in through the side door in cuffs. Calloway and Dugan didn't look like the men they'd been 2 nights ago. The swagger was gone. The smirks were gone. They looked smaller now, not because of the chains, but because of what had been stripped from them. The bailiff read the charges aloud. Aggravated assault, destruction of property, false imprisonment, tampering with evidence, official misconduct, 2 counts of felony, hate crimes. There was a pause after each charge. Like the courtroom needed a second to absorb the weight of it all, Jeremiah was called to the stand. He moved carefully, his ribs still screaming with each step, but his voice didn't tremble. He recounted the stop, the tone, the shift from suspicion to violence. The moment he realized they hadn't seen a man, they'd seen a target. "I didn't resist," he said, "but to them, I didn't have to. My presence was enough." The room held its breath. When the body cam footage played, there were gasps. Dugan's voice came through the speakers, loud and clear. "People like you." Then the lighter, the flames, the laughter. The room went dead silent. Then came Martha's tape. Her grainy camcorder footage showed what the official cams didn't: Jeremiah bleeding, asking them to stop, and the officers walking away from the burning truck like it meant nothing. When cross-examined, Jeremiah was asked why he didn't fight back, why he didn't yell, why he didn't run. He looked straight at the defense attorney and said, "Because they were waiting for me to do exactly that, so they'd have an excuse to put a bullet in me and call it justified." A murmur ran through the crowd. The judge gavelled twice. Next, Deputy Hensley took the stand. She was nervous at first. Her hands trembled, but as she spoke, her voice steadied. She admitted what she saw, what she failed to stop, what she chose to record instead of cover up. "I was afraid," she said, "but I wasn't afraid of Mr. Cole. I was afraid of what it would say about me if I stayed silent." And then she looked toward the gallery, straight at the other officers. "You all know what I'm talking about." By the end of the hearing, the judge found sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Calloway and Dugan were denied bail due to the nature of the charges and the overwhelming evidence. There were no cheers, no applause, just silence. The kind that falls when a town realizes it's finally being watched. Jeremiah stepped outside the courthouse, sunlight breaking over the horizon. Reporters closed in again, questions flying. But he didn't say a word, not until a man in a tailored gray suit stepped forward from the crowd. He looked government, federal maybe, clean cut, crisp drawl, slick smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Dan Cole," the man said, extending a hand. "Name's Weston, Department of Public Integrity." Jeremiah didn't shake it. "You're not here for a quote, are you?" Weston smiled. "Not exactly. You've kicked a hornet's nest, sir, and some of us up top are watching closely." Jeremiah waited. "What if I told you this wasn't isolated?" Weston said, voice low. "What if I told you this pattern, these kinds of stops, this kind of violence, it's statewide? We've got 3 other towns under review. But now, thanks to you, we've got momentum." Jeremiah's jaw tightened. "You saying this is bigger than just Hamilton County?" "I'm saying," Weston replied, "if you're willing, we'd like to expand your role permanently." Jeremiah looked out at the crowd, at the cameras, at the courthouse. He never thought he'd stand in again. Then he looked back. "Then it looks like I'm not done yet." The courthouse hearing had ended, but the storm had only just begun. News anchors replayed his testimony in slow motion. Civil rights leaders invoked his words in interviews. Hashtags flooded social media. Hashtag Cole for Justice. Hashtag Stand with Jeremiah. Hashtag Burned but not broken. But Jeremiah didn't care about the noise. He cared about what came next. The very next morning, long before the local cafes opened, he walked back into the sheriff's department with a new badge clipped to his blazer, one that bore a temporary title and full executive power. The governor's office had moved fast, signing an emergency mandate giving Jeremiah a 60-day appointment as interim compliance director. In that role, he had unrestricted access to department records, personnel files, evidence logs, and internal audits. And Hamilton County had no idea what was coming. Some officers couldn't meet his eyes when he passed. Others gave curt nods, unsure of what posture to take. A few greeted him with genuine respect. Most kept their heads down. The room wasn't silent, but it was tense. Jeremiah didn't need applause. He needed honesty. He walked into the department's internal records room and immediately spotted the red flags files that were too short, signatures that didn't match, timestamp logs missing entire days. For every documented report, there were two that had been resolved with no notes and no follow-up. It wasn't just sloppiness. It was method, a design, a machine built not to protect the community, but to protect itself. He spent the morning buried in documents, years of complaints involving the same 3 roads, the same handful of officers, the same demographic targets. He took notes, copied case numbers, marked every one that had been accidentally erased or deemed unsubstantiated by a superior. After lunch, Deputy Hensley joined him with 3 thick folders clutched in her arms. Her uniform was wrinkled from long hours, but her eyes were clear. "These were buried," she said, "in the storage cabinet under administrative closeout. 2 of the officers involved are still on active duty." Jeremiah opened the top folder and froze. "Dugan again," he said. "Yeah," Hensley replied. Both complaints involved black male drivers. One from 2 years ago, one from just 5 months back. Both stopped on Route 41. Both claimed the same thing: harassment, excessive force, and a threat made off camera. He flipped to the back page. Investigation closed by. Brent Calloway. Hensley finished. Jeremiah didn't say anything. They worked in silence for the next several hours, cataloging incidents, creating spreadsheets, organizing video evidence. It was like reconstructing a collapsed bridge, piece by piece. At 7:46 p.m., Jeremiah's computer pinged. The subject line read, "Urgent. Statement from Internal Affairs." He opened the email. "To whom it may concern, effective immediately. All open cases involving Officers Calloway and Dugan are being reassigned to the State Oversight Division. Previous internal determinations are hereby void. Full external audit ordered. Office of Internal Oversight." He leaned back in his chair. "It's starting," he said aloud. "They're finally taking it seriously." But his moment of relief was cut short. She answered, listened, then her brow furrowed. She hung up. "We've got a problem." "What kind?" "One of the whistleblowers. Luis Ortega, Patrol Division. They leaked his name." Jeremiah stood instantly. "Where is he?" "Hospital. He got jumped outside his house. 2 masked guys broke his arm. Concussion. Said something about snitches getting stitched." Jeremiah swore under his breath, "And they said we were exaggerating." "He's stable," she added, "but terrified." He asked if backing out was still an option. Jeremiah grabbed his jacket. "It's not. We protect him. Can we assign security?" "You're looking at the man who can," he said. He moved fast, calling in the senior command staff. Stepping into the hallway, where off-duty officers had gathered, the department went quiet as he stood at the center of the bullpen. "If you're part of this audit," he said, "you're now a target." Murmurs rippled through the room. "But so are they. And the difference is, we don't run from accountability. We don't bow to cowards in masks. We finish what we started." No one spoke, but heads began to nod. "You'll each be assigned partners rotating security details. If any of you are contacted, threatened, or followed, you report it immediately. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Immediately." He looked straight at a young patrol officer, who had been one of the first to come forward with evidence. "Luis Ortega's going to recover. But he's not the last person they'll come for. We either protect each other or we all go down." One of the older sergeants stepped forward. "Sir, if you give the word, we'll help cover everyone on your list." Jeremiah nodded. "That's the word." And like that, the department began to shift again, not because it had to, but because someone finally made it impossible not to. He returned to his office late that night. The hallway was dark, the building quiet. He sat down at his desk, surrounded by folders, footage, and the glow of a desk lamp The work was far from over, but Hamilton County was changing, and so was the country watching it. By the end of the second week, the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department was unrecognizable. Gone were the whispers in the hallways, the lazy shuffle of boots, the half-hearted salutes. In their place, clicking keyboards, back-to-back interviews, hushed voices behind closed doors, and the electric tension of change. What once resembled a quiet outpost of power now felt like a war room in the middle of a storm. Jeremiah moved through it all like a man possessed, not angry-focused. Every hallway he walked down, every file he opened, every officer he locked eyes with, carried the same message. The old ways were over. The reckoning wasn't coming. It was already here. The whiteboard in the main briefing room was covered edge to edge with timelines, case numbers, sticky notes with initials, and arrows pointing to internal reports. He didn't need red string. The pattern was crystal clear. Calloway and Dugan were only the most reckless, the most visible, but they were far from alone. One morning, a manila envelope arrived at the front desk. No name, no markings. Inside were a stack of printed emails, communications between a former captain and a city councilman. The subject, resolving misconduct complaints. Jeremiah handed the file to Glenn Tiller. Without a word, Glenn flipped through the pages, his jaw tightening with every line. These are deals. Quid pro quo. Silence for favors. Jeremiah confirmed. This is conspiracy, Glenn said, holding the paper like it might burn his hands. And it's going to trial, Jeremiah replied. But with each step forward came new resistance. First, it was anonymous voicemails, threats mumbled through static. Then scribbled notes, left under windshield wipers. Next came the smear campaigns, doctored images of Jeremiah in compromising poses, fake news articles alleging he had fabricated his badge credentials, forged emails claiming the audit was politically motivated. None of it stuck. He didn't respond, didn't flinch, because power doesn't explain itself. It acts. That Friday alone, he filed 4 more suspensions, 3 patrol officers and 1 lieutenant, all tied to falsified reports, mishandled traffic stops, or malfunctioning body cams. One of them, an officer with 20 years on the force, ripped his badge off his chest and slammed it on the front desk. "You're destroying what's left of this department," he shouted. Jeremiah looked him in the eye. "No, I'm saving it from people like you." Word spread quickly after that. The culture was shifting, not perfectly, not smoothly, but undeniably. Deputy Hensley, once a nervous rookie afraid to speak up, now oversaw field compliance. Her reports were detailed, fearless, and backed with evidence. When she walked into a room, people stopped talking, not out of fear, but out of respect. And she wasn't alone anymore. More officers, young and old, started bringing their stories forward. Old incident reports, photos that had been deleted, unfiled grievances. They were tired of silence, tired of pretending. Jeremiah listened to everyone. He remembered what Martha Tiller had said. They think they're untouchable, but that only lasts until someone reminds them they're not. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. A woman walked into the department lobby with a boy, maybe 9 or 10. The boy wore a backpack, twice his size, and gripped his mother's hand like he was entering a battlefield. His eyes were wide, flicking from officer to officer, absorbing everything. In his free hand he held something, a folded piece of construction paper. Jeremiah spotted them from down the hall. He walked over. The mother gave him a tired but grateful smile. "He wanted to give this to you," said. "He stayed up last night working on it." Jeremiah knelt slightly. "What's your name?" "Ty," the boy whispered. "You made something for me." Ty handed over the paper. "You're fixing the police." "My uncle. He was hurt by one." Jeremiah unfolded the drawing. It was a crayon sketch, rough but vivid. A tall, brown, skinned figure standing between 2 angry men in black. Behind him stood a group of smiling people, kids, parents, grandparents. "You're like a superhero," Ty said. Then he turned and ran, his mom mouthing thank you before following him out. Jeremiah stood there a long time, staring at the drawing. He tucked it into the inside pocket of his blazer, like it was a medal. It hit him harder than any trial, any report, any headline. This wasn't about policy anymore. It was about trust. That night, he called Glenn. "I want to hold a public press conference." "Inside the department? You sure?" Glenn asked. "With everything going on. That's why we have to. No suits, no filters. Just us. The truth. On our ground." 3 days later, the sheriff's department lobby was transformed. Rows of chairs were set up for families, business owners, clergy, and students. A banner hung across the back wall. Truth. Change. Together, the podium wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. Jeremiah stepped up and looked out at the crowd. Faces from the town he'd once feared would never accept him. Faces from the department he'd feared would bury him. And he began, "I was born 40 miles from here. I was told, growing up, that there were places I shouldn't walk after dark, that there were people I shouldn't talk back to, that a man like me needed to stay small, stay quiet, stay invisible." He paused, and for too long I did, until one night, a badge didn't protect me. A truck didn't protect me. My silence certainly didn't protect me. He looked out into the crowd and met Martha Tiller's eyes, so I decided to stop being silent. He told them everything. The traffic stop, the assault, the fire, the cover-ups, the threats, the retaliation, and the people like Hensley, like Martha, like Luis Ortega, who chose to stand up instead of step back. When he finished, the room was silent. No applause, no cheers, just stillness. And then someone in the back stood up. A teacher, then a pastor, then a young woman in a wheelchair. One by one, they stood, not for show, for solidarity, for truth, and that was enough. The silence in the room after the press conference didn't last forever, but what followed wasn't noise. It was something heavier, something stronger. It was understanding, a collective breath being held, and then finally released. From that day forward, something shifted in Hamilton County. People didn't just speak up, they stood up. The wall of silence that had protected corruption for years cracked wide open, and when it did, it turned out the ones holding it up weren't so strong after all. They just counted on no one ever pushing back. But someone had. Jeremiah didn't stop working. Even as the headlines slowed, even as the cable news networks turned their cameras elsewhere, he stayed. He showed up every morning, walked the same hallways, met with officers, read every file. It happens in the long, quiet days after the world stops watching. The state took notice. The governor's office issued a statewide directive requiring all law enforcement agencies to audit their complaint review processes. Jeremiah was invited to sit on a panel to rewrite training protocols for rural and underserved communities. He said yes, but only if the first session happened in Hamilton. Within 3 weeks, 3 neighboring counties came under investigation. 2 sheriffs stepped down voluntarily. One was indicted on multiple counts of misconduct. The ripple effect had begun, but Jeremiah wasn't chasing headlines. He was chasing justice. Back in Hamilton, the sheriff's department kept changing, not just in reports and titles, but in behavior. Mandatory ride-alongs with community members were introduced. Officers began recording civilian interactions not just because they had to, but because they wanted to rebuild trust. Hensley implemented a weekly peer review system where officers anonymously assessed each other's performance. It was bold, it was honest, and it worked. Each time Jeremiah passed through the department now, he felt something he hadn't in years: momentum. He had lunch with Martha Tiller every Thursday at the old diner on Peach Street. They sat by the window. She drank sweet tea, and he listened. They talked about her late husband, about what the town had been, and what it still could become. One afternoon, she slid a small frame across the table. Inside it was an old black-and-white photo: Sheriff Walter Tiller in uniform, standing beside a young Glenn, both smiling. On the back, Martha had written in neat cursive, "They tried to fix it. You finished what they started." Jeremiah said nothing, just slipped it into his briefcase. A week later, Ty came back, the boy who'd handed him the crayon drawing. This time, he wasn't alone. He came with his entire fourth-grade class. They toured the department, sat in patrol cars, asked questions. Some were silly, some were heartbreaking. One girl, shy and serious, raised her hand and asked, "Did you ever want to be something else?" Jeremiah knelt to her level. "I wanted to be someone who made things better." "I still do," she smiled. "You did, but not everything was done." The trial of Brent Calloway and Eric Dugan was fast, faster than anyone expected. With the body cam footage, Martha's video, and the growing pile of complaints resurfaced by the audit, the prosecution had a mountain to stand on. The defense tried to delay, tried to deflect, claimed media bias, claimed it was a political witch hunt. The jury didn't buy it. After only 4 hours of deliberation, the verdict came in, guilty on all counts. On sentencing day, the courtroom was full again, but this time, it wasn't curiosity that brought people in, it was closure. Jeremiah didn't sit in the front row. He didn't speak. He didn't even look at Calloway or Dugan, not out of hatred, but because they no longer mattered. Their words had no weight. Their power was gone. When Dugan tried to apologize, stumbling through a written statement, the judge didn't even let him finish. "You had chances," she said. "You had power. You chose to use it as a weapon." Both men received maximum sentences, stripped of all pensions, banned from law enforcement for life. As Jeremiah walked out of that courtroom, he didn't feel triumphant. He felt finished. One chapter had closed, for real this time. He drove back to the department, just as the sun dipped low over the trees, parked in his usual spot, walked the familiar hallway one last time. His office was just as he left it. The drawing Ty had given him still hung behind his desk, creased, colorful, imperfect but powerful. It said more than any title on a nameplate ever could. He sat down once, let the silence settle, then stood up, grabbed his coat, and turned toward the door. That's when Hensley knocked. "Got a call from the governor's office," she said. "They're offering you the position, permanent. And this place, they said it's yours to appoint," she replied. He studied her. "You ready to lead?" Her eyes widened. "Me? You've earned it." She stood up straighter. "Then I'll do it." He smiled. "Good." He paused in the doorway, taking it all in one last time, then stepped outside into the Georgia sun. He didn't feel like a man walking away. He felt like a man walking forward, because the fire hadn't broken him. It had revealed who he truly was. What happened in Hamilton County wasn't just a scandal, it was a mirror held up to a system too used to silence, too comfortable in its routines, and too blind to the people it swore to protect. But Jeremiah Cole didn't walk away. He stood up. He reminded us that integrity isn't about titles, and justice isn't about noise, it's about action. Quiet, steady, relentless action. This story isn't just about corrupt officers or courtroom victories. It's about what happens when one person refuses to stay silent, when one man chooses to stand between wrong and right, even when he's the only one standing. It's a reminder that no matter your age, your background, or your past, you can still be the one who makes things better. You can still be the one who finishes what others only dared to begin. To our older viewers, our veterans, our retired teachers, our grandparents, your voice still matters. Your presence still holds weight. And your values, honesty, fairness, courage, are more needed than ever in a world that sometimes forgets them. Don't think your part is over. It's just different now, and just as powerful. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of what still matters, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that speak truth, hope, and justice. Because sometimes one story is all it takes to light a fire and remind us that the fight for what's right is never over. Thank you for watching.